Hey everybody, Matt Jorgensen here. I been working on a project here with my Chevy Duramax, doing a Cummins conversion. Been working on this for about a month and a half, and decided that maybe some of you all would like to see what's going on. So I thought I'd take you along today on a little video and show you what we're doing with the truck. So let's head outside. What we've got here, it's a big mess. There's a bunch of the old intake tubing. We got our turbocharger mouthpiece for the LBZ Duramax, intercooler elbow right here. This is the driver's side intercooler pipe that went from the turbocharger down the intercooler. Upper radiator tube that hooks on the thermostat housing, a K&N intake, and the intake boxes here. Some of that's going to get repurposed. Empty boxes with parts. Set of ARP flex plate bolts right here, which I have found out can't really use with the adapter plates that I have. I'm not using de-stroked adapter plates. They're a little too expensive, personally. Found another set of plates basically identical. The flex plates are much, much thicker. They're a good solid 1/4 inch thick. So those bolts are way too short. And the factory bolts that came with the flex plate from the conversion company were grade 10.9. I'm pretty confident they're going to hold just fine. So we're not going to worry about them. They'll probably get returned. Climbing harness, that doesn't really have anything to do with this project. Factory Duramax alternator. There's a reman from O'Reilly's. It's only got like a year's use on it. That's going away. 6-speed Allison TCM glow plug control module. That won't be needed anymore. Section coolant hose. We'll keep this around. This will get reused on the Cummins swap for something. Well, coolant, obviously. Another empty box with the Kingpin adapter. That's not really part of this project. It's from my Fiasco in Pennsylvania. Some other crap that's still in the truck. As you can see, the truck is sitting pretty tall right now because there's no transmission, no transfer case, and no motor in it. So it's the torsion bars are pretty well unloaded. So let's take a look at what we got going on. There we go. Empty engine compartment right there. So what we've got here is the Cummins swap conversion brackets. These came from Paul Seaman up in Minnesota. Screaming Seaman Off-Road, or SSOR.biz. Good guy. He set me up with a bunch of little odds and ends that we're going to need to do this conversion. Got that one in. That one there, I was working on the other night. It's really giving me a hassle. I can only get one bolt to go clear through. It's like a half a bolt off, and it doesn't matter which side I start on. It's a half a bolt off. But I think we're going to use a little Dremel action on one of them, kind of elongate a little bit, get the bolt through. So that's that. Diamond Eye exhaust system. If you're buying an exhaust, I ran a diesel shop when I lived up in Wisconsin for about 3 years, and if you're going to buy an exhaust system, buy Diamond Eye. The pricing is a touch higher than MBRP, but unlike MBRP, your hangers don't rust off your pipes within the first winter and your pipe fall down on the ground. Now, I understand MBRP's got some better systems, but the better systems cost more than Diamond Eye, and Diamond Eye is still superior if you ask me. So that's my recommendation. It's a 4-inch exhaust system. It's got, you'll notice it's got that bulge in it right down there. That is a resonator. It's their quiet tone. I'm hoping to be able to keep that in place. I may have to cut that out depending on how the piping for my twin turbos has to go in. I don't know. So we'll find out, I guess, once we get the motor in, which actually is today's expenditure. It's the first fit of the motor. That's what we're working for. I've been told that some of these bolts up here need to be changed out. I'm not sure which ones. I guess we'll find that out as we get there. This is a power steering pump for the Duramax. This won't be used. We'll be using the gear drive pump on the Cummins. That's just hooked up right now because I didn't feel like, well, I'm just not to the point where I want to spill that oil all over, frankly, to change it out. So I'll try to turn it upside down, try to dump the oil out of it. It's still going to make a mess, and I know it, but hey. Wiring harnesses. Oh, the wiring harnesses everywhere. Just these wiring harnesses. This is the Duramax ECM right here. That'll be hanging along. That's going to be running the dash gauges. I've got, actually, it's going to be doing more than just dash gauges because I am putting the factory coolant and oil pressure sensors in, but I'm also putting in the intake air temperature sensor, fuel temperature sensor, some other sensors. I figure if I've got this ECM here, I might as well have the ability to data log some stuff, you know. So that's what we're doing. The wiring harnesses will get thinned, so that's another day's project. But we'll be taking all the wrapping off, and then they will get thinned back to the harness plugs, and then at that point we will pull the pins out for all the wires that feed things that we are not using anymore, to clean that wire harness up. My goal is to make this look factory, or very, very close to factory when we're done. And the Duramax AC compressor is just chilling up there right now because I haven't gotten around to disconnecting it. Basically, it's a dirt trap. The system's been evacuated. So this pump will not work with the bracket that's on my Cummins. And besides which, it's got a 6-groove pulley. Wouldn't be a whole lot of use anyway. And if I'm going to have to change the pulley and stuff out, it's no longer going to be a stock Duramax compressor. It's not going to be something I'm going to be able to go to an auto parts store and buy if I'm out on the road. So the pump I'm going to be using is a Sandin 4666. It'll fit the brackets I've got, and it's a standard medium duty truck AC compressor. So I can go to like any Freightliner dealer, international dealer, something like that, and they're probably going to have one on the shelf. So that's what we're going to do. I'll have to custom make some hoses no matter what. So if we're going to do it, we're going to do it for something that we can just go buy. So that's what we're doing there. So that's the truck in general right now. Let's go look at the motor. Okay, so my shop is a mess. I'm well aware of it. I know it. I've been told it by many people, and it's something I'm willing to talk about right now. So let's take a look at what we got over here. Yep, there we have 12-valve Cummins. And this one's got some goodies in it, a little bit different. So the block, it's been bored. This motor started out for another project that's been ongoing and kind of got hung up for about 4 years. So some of the details I'm a little foggy on. I believe there are 20 over pistons in there. They are non-intercooled pistons, so they're a large diameter bowl, but they're shallow, so you keep factory 12-valve compression of 16.8 to 1, so it'll still start good in the winter. Some of you who know me personally knew the motor that was in my old truck. That was 15.5 to 1. They were the big bowl pistons, but they were deep. And you can run a lot of boost and a lot of timing on those pistons, but they are not fun when it gets cold. That being said, I could start that motor down to 0 degrees, but you really had to know what you were doing, or you were just going to wear the batteries down and not get it started. This should be, just like any other 12-valve Cummins, easy start. Yeah, I know that harmonic dampener is really dirty. It's going to get cleaned. It's just on there right now. We got a brand new aftermarket P-pump gear case. This was a rotary pump motor originally. Had a VE rotary pump on it. Aftermarket gear case. This cost way less than the Cummins part. So saved me a lot of money there. Aftermarket front cover. The only thing with these aftermarket gear cases, the genuine Cummins gear case has a stepped hole for the dowel pin that's back in here, the killer dowel pin, for some of you that know, to keep it from falling out. Sorry about that, guys. When the battery says 26 minutes, it's lies. It's all lies. Anyway, so like I was saying, on these aftermarket cases, there's not a stepped hole for the killer dowel pin to keep it from falling out and getting in your gears and busting this part of the case out. So you do need to still put a tab on this, just like you would any 12-valve Cummins that's out in the wild with a factory gear case. So it really doesn't matter a whole lot. And for the fact that this was $180 and the factory Cummins one is like $270, that's a big deal. So yeah, that's new. This here, this bracket, this is considered the quote-unquote Freightliner bracket. It's also used on some Ford applications. It's designed to mount, so on a Dodge bracket, it kind of hangs down to about here, and it's got the AC compressor is mounted right here. And then it's got a spout coming out for the water bracket. So this one, the AC mounts right here, and then the alternator is right above it, which this is generally where a Dodge alternator would be. It would be the Dodge alternator, the bottom hinge would be right about here. Yeah, right about here. And then the top hinge of the alternator is a metal bracket that comes off of this boss right here. Now typically this is all Cummins part. This is Cummins part. That's Cummins part. And this is a 200 amp 28 SI Delco alternator. You guys are gonna cry when you find out how little this cost me. I got this from the local alternator place, Thatcher's Auto Electric in Coldwater, Michigan. If you live in the Michigan area, I highly recommend that guy. He does awesome work. This is a brand new, it is not rebuilt. This is a genuine 28 SI Delco alternator, 200 amp, 175 bucks. Just to put that in perspective, the 165 amp alternator that I was showing you on the flatbed of my truck, that cost me two bills, $200 from O'Reilly Auto Parts for a rebuilt one. This is brand new, 175 bucks. And it's got, I mean, just look at the shaft on that thing. It's got bearings, good solid bearings. The slip rings are bigger. Everything's bigger and heavier on this. This is going to be a way stronger, longer lasting alternator for less money. And it's brand new. It's not remade. So this is definitely a good route to go. This is your standard Dodge thermostat housing. Right here is the upper piece where the metal bracket would come across, down basically right through the middle here, you know, to hold the Dodge alternator in place. And this piece here is also from Paul Seaman. Now Cummins makes a bracket like this, and it just goes straight down, and goes. It's like it's just a tapered piece of metal. It doesn't have this nice fancy loop here with this hole in it. As you can guess, the Cummins piece, you can't use it with this thermostat housing because, well, it would go right through the middle of this pipe. So that is a no-go. The Cummins piece requires you to use the thermostat housing that has the outlet right here facing straight up, which it's for a medium-duty truck. It makes sense. Medium-duty trucks, the alternator, the radiator would be way up here. They'd have a big, you know, belt drive fan. So that makes total sense. But in a pickup truck conversion, this actually makes the most sense because even on my GM, the upper radiator outlet is going to be over here, about in this area. So this makes a lot more sense. So Paul's got this CNC plasma cut part that he sells. It's got this cool little teardrop shape. And there is kind of a juggling match. So you don't put the alternator in. You have to basically put the top bolt in because you can't really get to it with an Allen wrench once it's there, and then swivel this piece up, and then you can kind of dance all those parts down through this hole and swivel everything into place. The bottom hole you can get to with an Allen wrench, no problem, and then you tighten it all up. You're good. So this works. This is like $60. It's well worth every penny. Totally worth it. So moving on. This truck is going to have twin turbochargers. This turbo is very tired. And this was on my old truck. And as you can see, the compressor wheel on that thing has seen much better days. It's and it comes from being on my pulling tractor, making way too much boost with no air filter. And yeah, so the poor thing's just used up. This is wastegated. This is not an HX35. For those of you who don't know, HX35s have a snap ring that holds this cover on. This you'll see has a V-band clamp on it right here. This is an H1C like the old intercooled trucks and non-intercooled trucks had. The old body style 89 to 93 Dodges, the only difference being it's got a wastegated exhaust housing. And if you're running a single charger, this is actually not a bad housing to use. It's a 14 centimeter housing, whereas the HX35s had a 12. It's a little lazier off the line, but it does breathe better in the upper end. I seriously considered using this housing on my HX35. It will bolt on. The flange is the same. The reason I did not, as my friend Stan, Black Sky Racing, my HX35 that went to him is getting gone through. It's going to end up with a 60-ish millimeter billet compressor wheel, a 10-bladed 64 millimeter exducer turbine wheel, and he's recommending the 12 centimeter housing so that it spools good, because with the 10-bladed 64 millimeter wheel, it'll probably flow just as well as this 14 centimeter housing flows with the stock wheel. So I'm going to believe him on that one. He should know. He's booked quite a few of those, and so that's what we're going to run for the little charger, the manifold charger. And for the big charger, that's also not the big charger that's going on this truck. That charger actually has no rotating assembly in it. That's an HT60 that I bought, and I promptly broke the shaft on it the first time I ever took my twins out for a drive on my old Dodge. Just snapped the shaft on it. The thing had been, well, I should have known. Newbie mistake. I actually had to hammer on the shaft to get it out of the compressor wheel because it was seized on. It never occurred to me to just heat the compressor wheel up and sacrifice it. And because I messed up the compressor wheel and had to buy a new one anyway, and then promptly snapped the shaft and trashed that compressor wheel. And I decided, forget it. I went to a junkyard and I got a boneyard charger, and everything was good. That's an HT60. That's what the new one is as well, or the newer one is. This is a stock charger off of an N14 Cummins. Don't know what this one came off of. The one that's going on here came off of a Cummins N14 525 horsepower Select Plus. So, and I know that with this charger, it was a sweet setup. It spooled fast. It pushed air hard. It was a good towing twin setup. I was when I had my motor in my old truck with this turbo and then the HT60 below it. Oh, actually, it was beside it because it was in my Chevy pickup that I converted at the time, which was a old body style. So there was no room down here. It sat out over here. But anyhow, when I had those two chargers, that setup made 502 SAE horsepower at the rear wheels at 1900 RPM, 1260-ish foot-pounds of torque at 1850 RPMs. And at that, when towing a trailer, it would hit about 65 to 70 pounds of boost. And basically, EGTs never went over. I think once I saw them hit 1300, and that was like full throttle, fourth gear, you know, up a hill, going into Milwaukee or something like that, with like 38,000 pounds gross combined between the truck and the trailer. Because at the time I was pulling my 40-foot gooseneck, which was tri-axle with duals. So it's when we were moving back to Wisconsin. That was an interesting trip. That's for another video. So either way, right here we have the adapter plate set up. Adapter plate bolts mostly with hex bolts like this, except for this one right here, which is Allen bolt, and that's just because of the close proximity to this bell housing bolt. Flex plate. There's no flex going on here. This thing is thick. It is a good solid 1/4 of an inch right here, at least. Over here, it's even an 1/8, and these holes are countersunk from the back side. 6-liter power stroke starter, nothing special. Bolts right in there. You'll notice 6-liter power stroke starters have 2 bolts going in from the back side and 1 going in from this side. One thing I do like about this, better than the stroked adapter plates I've seen, the stroked adapter plates have the starter kind of cocked a little bit. I believe this bolt lands inside the transmission bell housing on a destroked setup, and that would suck if that's the case. Now, I don't know that for a fact. I've never actually been up close and personal to a destroked setup on an Allison, but just from my initial guesstimates, I think that's how it would be. Whereas for this system, so here's a bell housing bolt, here's a bell housing bolt. The factory starter hump, I think, is going to go right around here, and it's going to keep on going. There's a bell housing bolt. So I'm thinking, because this is the center line of the transmission housing here, and it's going to have the hump. I think it's going to clear this bolt. It almost has to, because I'm almost positive it doesn't come out this far. So that's pretty basic stuff. This is a billet freeze plug. It's a solid piece of aluminum. So you take the rear freeze plug out. It's a solid piece of aluminum. It has an indentation that comes off the back with a rubber O-ring. You clean this real good. You pop that in there. So for those who aren't aware, 12-valve Cummins at high RPMs, the water pumps on these things can generate enough pressure to blow the frost plugs out of the block. People who do truck pulls a lot will put these in, and then there's a 1/2-inch NPT hole. They'll put an elbow in there and some hose and have a bypass that like just dumps back to the radiator. And when they're going to go pulling, they open that bypass up, and it just lets the water flow right up and go back to the radiator, and it drops pressure in the block. And you also get better cooling to the number 6 cylinder. I wasn't so worried about that. I'm not likely to see the RPMs necessary. I've been told it takes about 4,000 RPMs to really be a problem. but I don't want to pull this block in the future for really any purpose for a long, long time. So I decided to go with this so that way I don't ever have to worry about this frost plug rusting out, popping out, etc. It's just like, nope, not going there. What I did find out is when you have a billet frost plug, you have a problem. Namely, that the frost plug and the transmission bell housing want to share the same piece of real estate. So I had a couple choices. I could grind the back side of this ear. I didn't really want to do that. I wanted to leave myself, since this is aluminum and since the Allison's not exactly a lightweight transmission, I wanted to be able to get as much thread engagement as possible. So what I did is I took this piece out and I just chucked it in my mill, put a hole down on each side to kind of hold it down to the table, and then just took an, I think it was, well, you can see it right there. I think that was originally a inch end mill. It's been resharpened a few times, so it's probably down to like 7/8 of an inch or something like that. But I just took that thing and I just started making passes in here and just gouging it out until it was gouged out flush with the block. And you're like, well, it's going to leak. Well, no, because right here where the frost plug opening is, it's like that thick because it goes into the block, and that's where the O-ring is. The O-ring seal is not against the face of the block. It's against the inside of this hole here, minus the frost plug, obviously. It seals down in here with an O-ring. So you can see we got a lot of material in there. So basically, we've still got the full circle of material. It's just that it's not supported on the bottom. Which, did it weaken this? Definitely. Is it going to be a problem for me? I highly doubt it. Plus, since I machined it off just flush, that piece is now being supported by this. It's going to hold into that. It's going to hold that in the block and keep that from flexing and breaking and coming out and everything else. I'm pretty confident this is not going to be an issue, but I'm just warning anybody who's thinking about doing a billet frost plug in a Chevy bell housing, you will have to do something along this lines. Now that being said, I probably could have figured that these two bolts, this bolt, this bolt, this bolt, would probably hold the Allison by itself and you ground this, machine this out, and just put a shallow bolt in here. I mean, that's still almost 3/4 of an inch of thread engagement. It might have been okay, but I was more worried about this here than this here. So that's what we did. We machined it out. All right, factory valve covers with some paint. What is that? That, my friends, is a valve cover breather assembly. From Cummins, this setup, this get up here, runs a couple $100. I got this through Pure Diesel Power. They've got some sources where they get these parts. This is a Cummins part. So for those who don't know, CNH, Case New Holland, CNH, Case helped Cummins develop the B series Cummins. They went halvesies on designing this motor. Cummins got rights to it. Case got rights to the design to put in Case tractors. Cummins got rights to the design for everything else. So when people tell you that they know somebody who had a Case with a 12 valve Cummins in it, that's only technically partially correct. For all intents and purposes, yes, it had 12 valve Cummins. However, that motor will say nowhere on it Cummins. It was not built in a Cummins factory. It was actually built by CDC, Consolidated Diesel Corporation. Because Case is a joint owner of this design, they do not have to buy the motors from Cummins. They can take the blueprints and go to any engine manufacturer they want and say, build this motor. And as long as the motor goes into a Case tractor, Cummins can't say anything about it. Now, if Case were to build the motors and try to sell them to like Dodge, for instance, and it'd get ugly. But so that being said, this part fits on 12 valve Cummins. This is not a Cummins part. This is actually a CDC part, or a CDC. I don't think really exists anymore. I'm not real up on that. But for all intents and purposes, this is a genuine Cummins part. The only difference is, once again, instead of being like $280 some odd, it's like $179 or $180 or something like that. From my buddy Garrett over at Pure Diesel Power. Tell him Matt sent you. And it's not because I get a kickback, it's just because I like to help him out. He's a great guy. And you won't get better customer service than from Garrett's crew. Moving over to this side of the motor finally, we've got your good old 12 valve Cummins mainstay, the P7100. This is P7100 off a 180 horse application. I bought this off eBay, have not fired it up. Supposedly it's got 4K governor springs. It's obviously had something done because the safety wire here has been cut and taken out. So it's supposed to have 4K governor springs. It's supposed to have laser cut delivery valves in it. Those will have to go away. That's not practicable for a street rig. That's gonna be dirty and smoky and run really hot. I got to get my fuel line or my oil line put on. I got to get my return line put on. As you can see, the pump's not tight to the case because if you get it tight to the case, you can't get your hand down in there to work on it. So that's just chilling right now. Brand spanking new, genuine Cummins lift pump right here. I love them things. They're dead on reliable. They last for about 100 and some thousand miles. I don't care if you've got a 12 valve Cummins and it's got more than 150,000 miles on it, especially if this thing's never been replaced, it needs to be replaced. I have not yet seen one of these things on a truck over 100 and some odd thousand miles where if you put a fuel pressure gauge on the pump, it maintains the 30 to 35 PSI that you should get. This part from Cummins, I bought it through the local Freightliner dealer because usually the semi dealers are always cheaper than Cummins is. That's just a fact. And typically they're cheaper than any place else too, especially Freightliner. Freightliner is kind of a budget brand. So this was like $97 from the local Freightliner dealer. I don't have anything special with them. I'm just a guy walking in off the street. First time I ever bought anything from them. 97 bucks for that. So that's not bad. And then the fuel return line has a banjo bolt here that has a ball and spring in it. It's called the overflow valve. Those also get pounded to death. I have literally seen 12 valve Cummins trucks when I was running my shop where you'd put a fuel pressure, they complain about poor performance. You put a fuel pressure gauge on. I had a special it was an adapter. It was just a standard hollow banjo bolt for the fuel supply line that I drilled a hole in the end of and brazed a funky conglomeration of fittings on with a needle valve so I could put a fuel pressure gauge on and read pressure. I usually add a long hose so I could reach back in the cab and drive it, with the window open under load. And what I always found was like most of these things had like anywhere from in one case I saw 10 pounds, but anywhere from 15 to 20 PSI, which is not enough pressure for this pump to deliver to its potential. If you've got an old 160 or a 175 horse motor, don't even waste your time on 4K springs for it, because the way the pumps are calibrated, you won't get fueling above 3,000 RPMs unless you're pushing close to 100 pounds of fuel pressure into that pump. It's been proven on the dyno again and again. 160 to 175 pumps need at least 70 pounds, and you will get horsepower gains up to the 100 PSI level on these, just because on the 160 and 175s, they don't have enough dwell time at the bottom of stroke for the barrel to fill up again to inject fuel, and then they start to cavitate and you're not pumping full fuel. So fuel pressure to these things, I mean, yeah, you can have, if you get them primed up, you can have no lift pump and they will suck from the tank. And it probably ain't going to hurt them, but the performance will suck. Your timing's going to be way off, EGTs will be high. It's just not, no balls, it's just not going to be fun. So in this case, the factory overflow valve is garbage. Torque Tech. I use Torque Tech overflow valves. They're actually cheaper than the Bosch overflow valves. They are adjustable. They got a little nut deal bolt in the end of them. You can adjust the pressure to tune it right in, and they last really good. They also prevent drain back, which the factory Bosch ones won't. So if you, especially if you got this in an older Dodge application where the fuel lines are kind of maybe iffy, this will help. If you got a tiny pinhole leak in the return line, it'll help prevent that drain back issue that makes for a long crank in the morning, when you start the truck. So highly suggest it. It probably needs to be replaced anyway. And like I said, it's cheaper than the Bosch part. You can't go wrong. Better, cheaper, it's all good. That's the opening for the power steering pump. So I've got a non-intercooled application power steering pump that's the real stubby. It doesn't have the vacuum pump in it. So it only comes back to like here. I think that's going to work great. I used it in my last Chevy conversion. Those are getting hard to find now. And then right here, we got an adapter. This was tough to find. This is tough to find. So if you're doing a Duramax conversion, this is the oil pressure sensor. The oil pressure sensor is O-ring straight thread. It has an O-ring right here that seals to the block, and then straight threads that thread into the block. That is M14 by 1.5. M14 by 1.5 is the thread on that. That is metric straight thread. The block on the Cummins, if you've got a 12 valve block, not a storm block. If you got a storm block, they're metric. That's what storm stands for, straight O-ring metric. At least that's what I've been told. So if you got a storm block, this will be a metric thread, and then you all just have to get a metric to metric adapter. This is not, and an easy way to know if you got a storm block. Storm blocks were typically 99-24 valves and up, although some of the 98-12 valves did have storm blocks. Easy way to know if you got a storm block, probably the easiest way. See how this has only got one turbocharger drain? There's nothing back here. A storm block has a turbocharger drain here, and it's got a turbocharger drain right there, which would be nice for my twins. I'm gonna have to take my pan off and punch a hole in it, but alas, I don't have a storm block. So this adapter, I got it off eBay. You will find lots of adapters that go from M14 by 1.5 male to 1/8 inch pipe female, which is exactly backwards from what you really need. This adapter was only like $12 off eBay, and as you can see, it isn't long enough to reach the O-ring. So what I'm gonna have to probably do is I'm gonna give it a try. I think it'll work. Is get a flat rubber O-ring, because as you can see, this is flat on the end, and stick it down in there, kind of like a garden hose O-ring almost. Do that, clean the threads real well, and coat them with some red Loctite so the thing doesn't back out. I also may try a copper crush washer, because that'll actually, I think, maybe keep this tight better than and I'm not left-handed. Wow. So yeah, that's that. Up there, that big old opening, that's going to get a reducing bushing put in it, and then that's where that is reported to be the hottest spot on 12 valve Cummins block. That corner right there, it gets the least amount of water circulation. So if you're doing this conversion, that's where you want to put your temperature sensor, and that's where mine's going to go. I'm going to put that in there. And that's about it. This motor stand right here, that is a 750-pound engine stand from Harbor Freight Tools for like 150 bucks, 160 bucks. I bought that this spring when I was rebuilding the motor in my E350 Mercedes-Benz that I have since sold to my mom. It was fine for the E350. That motor was probably like 400 pounds ish. It was actually surprisingly heavy for being an all aluminum engine, but for this 12 valve Cummins, this thing, as you sit right now with the turbo hanging off it, that thing's probably at least 1,000 pounds. It's actually starting to bend the leg down there a little bit. You can see that. That's also why the motor is mounted sideways on here. If I'd have mounted it lengthwise, this thing would have folded over a long time ago. Mounting it crosswise, it at least gets the center of gravity back closer to the stem. And when it didn't have the head on it, I could rotate it upside down. And I'm wishing I'd have taken the oil pan off then and punched the hole in the block, or whatever. Live and learn, I guess. I was thinking maybe I could do a combined drain, and I should have just known better and done it right and whatever. And that was fine. So these are the slots. These are the slots where the arms would normally go that go out to your bell housing on a normal engine. I ended up taking this off and taking it out of the engine stand while this was hanging on an engine hoist, and I very precisely machined out with a blue-tipped wrench. And for those who don't get the reference, a cutting torch. Just a cutting torch, and just gouged out a spot for this bolt to go through. So I got that bolt and these two, and I can still use it with the regular arms in here for holding other kinds of engines. So I didn't destroy it that way for use, and it holds it pretty solid. It's doing all right. I might when we get this motor off of here, I'm gonna probably, this has just got like a single bolt holding this leg on, you know, and it's not happy. I'm probably going to actually take it apart and grind the paint off here and across there and just weld it solid, and might even shove something up inside of it to reinforce it. This would be a good solid little engine stand. I've reinforced these before, and they work pretty good. And there's no grease on this. I actually kind of like the friction, because it keeps you, if you are trying to turn the engine, it keeps it from just flipping over. So, and yeah, so that's about it. So today's docket, we're gonna get the return line put on here and get the oil line put on so I can get the pump up into place like it should be. And then we're going to take that turbo off, which is just kind of held on by a couple bolts, that's all, and they're not even tight. It's just up there for fabbing of piping. And we're going to grab it with the tractor or take it out to the truck and stuff it in for our first fitting and see how it fits. So that's it for now. I'll catch you later. Alright, so it's been a couple hours. Motor's basically ready to stick in the truck for its first test fitting, so let's check it out. Alright, so looks a little different than it did before. We got the injection pump is now mounted properly up tight to the timing cover there. Fuel shutdown solenoid, brand new, all installed in the brackets. Injector lines are on. The injectors are in. The lines are just on finger tight. They'll have to come back off so we can put the intake plate on. The intake plate needs some machine work done to it for fitting some of the Duramax specific sensors into it. So I decided instead of putting it on, taking it off, just put this piece of cardboard in there to keep the dirt out. And I can leave the plate out that way. Got the injection pump set to 19 degrees before top dead center. Got the oil filter spout on, all that with the new gasket. And chain on, ready to lift it out. We're going to get the tractor and pluck this thing out. Oh, there's the Torque Tech overflow valve I was talking about earlier. Right here, oh, focus, right here, this little stub on the end, there's a sealing ring in there, and that allows you to thread that in or out to adjust your fuel pressure. Apart from that, you'll notice my double breather valve cover assembly I was so proud of. It's not here anymore. Found out it hits on the injector lines right here. So I got to talk to my friend, talk to Garrett up there at PDP, find out, do we have to bend the lines down? Do you have to take a grinder to it? Do we have to do a combination of both? There's really not a lot of meat in there. It doesn't look like anyway that I can grind out on that valve cover assembly. And it's not exactly cheap, so I don't want to mess it up. So I'm going to find out what they've done with them in the past. Apart from that, we are ready for our test fitting. We got to pull one of the brackets out of the truck, and then we can do a little die grinding on that to get the bolts and holes to line up, and then we're ready to drop the motor in the truck. So we're going to go get that done. Alright, so as you can see, it's fairly late. It's probably pushing 7 o'clock. Yeah, it's about 7 o'clock out. And this is where we got. Motor's in. We ended up taking the alternator and the turbocharger off. It's making the engine heavy on this side, making it lean this way. It was a really pain. Motor mounts in. The exhaust will have to be cut out. It's just barely clearing over there. The motor mount on that side. As you can see, there's a lot of room on this side. This is going to be really easy to work on in the future. The top bolt on the transmission is going to be fun because it's going to be right in the way of the tunnel of the truck, but I think it'll be doable. Not bad for a day's work. Well, that's all for today. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.